My life runs on a schedule. Not just a to-do list, but a color-coded, cross-referenced, minute-by-minute itinerary for existence. My sock drawer is organized by color and then by fabric type. My books are alphabetized by author. My spices are arranged by cuisine, then alphabetically. This isn't a quirk. It's a survival mechanism. My childhood was a tornado of chaos, and as an adult, I have dedicated myself to living in the dead calm eye of a self-made storm. I don't do mess. I don't do spontaneity. My name is Arthur, and my emotional state is best described as carefully curated. So when the apartment next to mine for B was finally rented out, I was, to put it mildly, a walking panic attack. For 2 years, it had been empty, a silent, blessed void. Now I had to contend with a new variable, a new potential source of noise, smells, and unacceptable levels of disorder. The first sign of trouble was the paint. It was a brilliant, almost offensively cheerful shade of cerulean blue, and there was a splatter of it on the shared hallway floor, dangerously close to my doormat. I stared at it like it was a crime scene. I was contemplating calling the building manager, the police, and possibly an exorcist, when the door to 4B creaked open. A guy leaned out, his hair a mess of black curls. A smudge of the same blue paint streaked across his cheek like war paint. He was wearing a paint-splattered t-shirt and jeans that had seen better decades, and he was holding a dripping brush. "Oh, hey," he said, his voice friendly and maddeningly casual. "Neighbor, right? I'm Nico. Sorry about the mess." This blue had a mind of its own. He grinned, a wide, easy smile that did absolutely nothing to soothe the frantic buzzing in my brain. "You're a painting?" I asked, my voice tight. "Trying to," he laughed. "Turns out getting a wall to look like a Santorini sunset is harder than it looks. It's mostly looking like a smef exploded." I just stared at him, then at the paint drip. "You should put down a drop cloth." "Yeah, probably," he said, completely unconcerned. "Anyway, nice to meet you." He disappeared back into his apartment, leaving me alone with a blue menace on the floor. That was the beginning of the chaos. Nico's presence was an assault on my carefully ordered life. It wasn't just the paint. It was the sound of his electric sander at 10 in the morning on a Saturday. It was the faint, sharp smell of turpentine that seeped under my door. It was the loud, joyful, and completely unpredictable music. One day it was opera, the next was 90s hip-hop that vibrated through our shared wall. We had a few more brief, hallway encounters. Each time, he was a whirlwind of easy charm and low-grade disaster. He'd be wrestling with a giant, abstract canvas that wouldn't fit in the elevator, or carrying leaking bags of groceries, a trail of flour dusting the floor behind him. He was always smiling, always apologetic, and always making a mess. He was my personal nightmare, dressed in paint-splattered denim. The breaking point came, as it often does, with water. I came home one Thursday from my perfectly orderly job as an accountant to the sound of a fire alarm shrieking and the sight of water seeping from under my front door. My heart seized. I threw the door open and was met with a scene from my deepest, darkest fears. Water was dripping from the ceiling, pooling on my pristine hardwood floors, and a thin stream was running directly toward my antique bookcase, the one holding my alphabetized collection of first-edition classics. I was completely paralyzed. My brain, which could normally calculate a solution to any problem, just shut down. All I could see was the chaos, the disorder, the invasion. Suddenly, Nico was there, his own door thrown open. "Oh my God, Arthur. Is it bad?" He took one look at my face in the spreading water and seemed to understand everything. Okay, don't panic." He ran past me, into my apartment. "The main water shutoff is in the basement. I'll go kill it. Grab every towel you own." His calm, commanding voice snapped me out of my trance. I did as I was told, my movements jerky and robotic. By the time he got back, panting, I had a pathetic dam of towels built around the bookcase. Water was still dripping, but the main flow had stopped. It turned out a pipe in his bathroom had burst. His apartment was a mess, but mine, with its expensive floors and carefully placed furniture, had suffered the real damage. "I'm so sorry," Nico said, looking at the puddles on my floor. He looked genuinely devastated. "This is a nightmare. I'll pay for everything, obviously." "It's fine," I said, the words automatic, even though it was the opposite of fine. My sanctuary had been breached. No, it's not fine, he insisted. Look, we have to get this stuff off the floor before it warps. Where can we move it? For the next 3 hours, Nico became a gentle, focused whirlwind. He helped me move my sofa, roll up my rugs, and carefully, painstakingly, move every single book off the bottom 2 shelves of my bookcase. I watched horrified and helpless as my perfect order was dismantled. He was careful, though. His movements, which I'd always seen as chaotic, were surprisingly precise. He picked up a small leather-bound box from a bottom shelf. "What's in here?" he asked. "Just old photos," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "From my mom." He held it like it was a sacred object. He found the driest, safest spot in the kitchen and placed it on the counter, high above any potential water damage. He didn't just see a box. He saw what was important. When we were finally done, we were both exhausted, sweaty, and sitting on my displaced sofa in the middle of my living room. The dripping had stopped. The only sound was the hum of the dehumidifier Nico had miraculously produced from his own apartment. My perfect space was in a state of controlled disarray. And weirdly, I was okay. "I really am sorry, Arthur," Nico said, breaking the silence. He ran a hand through his messy hair, making it even messier. "I know how much you like things a certain way. It's just stuff," I said, and the word surprised me. I was looking at the box of my mom's photos, safe on the counter. He had saved the only thing that was truly irreplaceable. "Still," he said, "I feel like I brought a hurricane into your perfectly calm harbor." He gestured around my living room. Everything was shades of gray, beige, and white. The lines were clean, the surfaces were bare. "It's beautiful. Like a museum. Museums are where things go to die," I said, the thought coming out of nowhere. He looked at me, a curious tilt to his head. "What's so scary about a little mess?" I looked around at my displaced life, at the stacks of books on my dining table, at the sofa at a weird angle. The chaos was contained, but it was there, and I hadn't had a panic attack. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was Nico's steady, calm presence. When I was a kid, I said the words quiet in the humming room. My house was always a mess. Not a creative mess like yours probably is. A sad mess. Piles of laundry, dishes in the sink for weeks. My parents they had a lot of problems. Nothing was ever stable. Nothing was ever reliable. I took a shaky breath. So I learned to control what I could. My room, my books, my socks. It was the only way I felt safe. Nico was silent for a long time. I risked a glance at him. He wasn't looking at me with pity. He was looking at me with a profound, aching understanding. "My house was the opposite," he said softly. "Everything was perfect. Not a speck of dust. My dad was a surgeon. Everything had to be sterile, precise. There was no room for error. No room for life, really." He looked down at his own hands, which were perpetually stained with flecks of paint. "I think that's why I love painting. It's messy. It's unpredictable. You make mistakes, and sometimes the mistakes are the most beautiful part of the whole thing." He turned to look at me, his eyes dark and serious. "You're not a kid anymore, Arthur. You're safe. You don't have to keep everything locked down so tight." My carefully constructed walls, the ones I had been building since I was 8 years old, began to crack. He wasn't just talking about my apartment. He reached out, his fingers hovering just above my hand. "It's okay to let a little color in." And then he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a neat and tidy kiss. It was messy and hesitant and a little bit desperate. It was the collision of 2 completely different worlds. It was the most spontaneous, out of order, and terrifyingly wonderful thing that had ever happened to me. And when he pulled away, my perfectly curated world was in ruins. And I had never felt so free. Things didn't change overnight. The next day, I woke up and immediately started putting my books back on the shelf in alphabetical order. But when I got to the box of my mom's photos, I left it on the counter. A small, acceptable island of disorder. Nico paid for the floor to be professionally dried and repaired. He also showed up at my door a few days later with a small, framed painting. It was an abstract swirl of blues and grays, but with a single, brilliant streak of yellow. "For the wall," he said with a sheepish grin. To break up the beige, I took it, and I hung it up. I started spending time in his apartment. It was, in fact, a glorious creative mess. Canvases were stacked against every wall, books were piled on a floor, and every surface was covered in jars of brushes and tubes of paint. But it was also alive. It was warm and vibrant and filled with the energy of creation. I'd sit on his paint-splattered sofa and read while he painted, the air thick with the smell of turpentine and the sound of his happy, off-key humming. He didn't make me messy, and I didn't make him neat. We just made space. I learned that a coffee ring on a table wasn't a catastrophe. He learned that rinsing out a paintbrush right away meant he didn't have to buy a new one every week. One Saturday, he convinced me to help him with a giant canvas. He handed me a brush. "Just make a mark," he said. My hand trembled. It felt like an act of vandalism. But I looked at his encouraging smile, took a deep breath, and dragged a long, wobbly, imperfect blue line across the white canvas. Nico beamed. "See? It's a start." He was right. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a disaster. It was just a mark. A small, beautiful, unpredictable piece of chaos. And it was ours.